Okay, so I thought I would go over some good examples of contour from previous students I've had. Let's start with this one. So this is obviously when we had access to our studios and full skeletons and we weren't just working from skulls. This is a student looking down at a headless rib cage, fun, and it looks like it was positioned next to a mirror. They decided to contour the reflection of the rib cage in red. You can always use red colored pencil with your charcoal pencils to bring some interest and contrast into your contour drawings. Look at the way the vertebrae are meticulously drawn. This was seen very clearly. Look at how not all of the lines are the same thickness. Some are thin, wispy kind of lines, others are thicker, describing the weight of the form or the light that was on the form. So vary your line weights. In this next drawing, it's a full headless skeleton. Look at the crisp quality of the line. The places that are the hardest to describe verbally are the places where they're visually drawn the best. Remember, if you can't name it, it's void of symbolism. So your eye can communicate with your brain without any kind of preconceived symbolism or iconography getting in the way. So this is a very crisp, beautiful contour drawing. And look, it's got a little hint of change at the very top where the neck would have continued into the head. The head is not present, but you can see there's like a little wisp of what would have been there, or they thought the vertebrae started up there, but they changed their mind. That's a good thing. I want to see the history of the drawing. This next one, another great example of a contour drawing made by a student. Look at the sense that you get of the position of the student in comparison to what they were looking at. You know that they were underneath and they're looking up. We know that because the vertebrae are coming at us, they're getting bigger, and we can look up into the rib cage like we're looking up into a vessel like a church bell. This is just done by carefully looking at the positive and negative space and the shape that it makes. This is a beautiful contour drawing of the skeleton. Now, before I've mentioned that you don't have to use your eraser. If you do feel the need to use it, don't scrub everything clean. Erasers aren't really, in this class anyway, for getting rid of any trace of making a mistake. Think of your eraser as a paintbrush that you can use to paint back or push back things that don't need the viewer's full attention. So contrast, think of it as a paintbrush, something that pushes things back, makes them a little ghostly. That's a good way to use your eraser. Here we have a gorilla skull that was on campus. Look here, very similar to what I was saying about the neck area of the full skeleton. Do you see where they first drew the gorilla skull, how big it was and how it shrank? Good drawings grow and shrink because our first idea is not often our best idea. So I encourage you to leave a little bit of that ghost of that first idea so I can see how smart you are and that you changed your idea. You scrutinized and you got more specific about what you were seeing. And that dark line quality, not all contour has to be the same mood, right? Some people are very crisp and light and airy, other people are very dark and brooding. Be yourself. Here we have a drawing of a cow skull. I know it's a cow skull because it doesn't have front teeth like a horse. Look at the vertical lines that are kind of cutting through this cow skull that the student used. Why would they do that? Okay, so we see vertical lines really clearly, and sometimes we can measure verticals more easily than anything else, more easily than diagonals for sure. So look at how dimensional this looks. You can almost imagine this skull being placed inside a three-dimensional cube, like if you put it in a box, right? That's because of the diagonal relationship between one jawbone that you can see a little bit in the distance and the other jawbone. So think about the three-dimensionality of the object that you're drawing. What we're going to look for is that major edge. So if you're in the cube, or if you're putting the skull in the cube, the major edge is like the bow of the ship coming right at you. This area is probably some of the darkest areas to contour because it is the closest to you, and it helps you make things look three-dimensional. Here's a drawing of two skulls. Remember, I said to pick interesting angles when you're drawing a still life. This is a lot more interesting and fun to draw than that frontal view of the skull, that Jolly Roger iconographic symbol of a skull, something that you would make like an emoji of, something overly obvious. This, on the other hand, the student is drawing the underneath part of the skull. They're turning the skull a little bit, so we get that cube on its side, that we can see a major edge of the skull. This makes the shapes that you see more obvious because they're strange and unfamiliar. If something is too familiar looking, it's harder to draw because your brain kind of fills in the gaps. We want things to look fresh so we can kind of discover them for the first time when we draw. Yet again, this student is also using little vertical lines. They're probably measuring the distance between one vertical and another, making sure they're not making equal distances or gaps when they skip over the page with their hand. Here is a very different example of crossover contour. This is very dark, very brooding, very moody. And look at how beautifully this clavicle bone kind of floats on top of this rib cage. Very three-dimensional. Lovely line quality. Good artists steal. So if you like this, fake it, right? Fake it until you make it. Here we have a page of crossover contours completed by a student on the first day of class. Sorry if this one's a little blurry, but this is a great example of that crossover contour, that continuous line. They've drawn some cow skulls with paper stuffed into the nasal cavity, some skulls, some shoulder blades, some arm bones, some humeruses, some pelvises. The line quality is what I really want you to see, and the way they group everything on the page. You can kind of use this as a sketchbook to really fill up the page. And lastly, we have a very clear example of that crossover contour that we practiced earlier in the week. Great line quality. They're setting things up so that they look unfamiliar. We don't have that frontal Jolly Roger, yet again, that skull symbol staring at us. They took the jaw off of their skull and they made it kind of crooked and a unique view, right? That's what we're looking for. So these are some great examples of contour that I want you guys to be aware of. Thank you for watching.